As I travel, Philadelphia has a sound that is unique, and I'm from North Philly, so that's like the hardest part of Philly. Some people might say West Philly is the hardest, but North Philly, there were some great drummers that came from North Philly, some great jazz drummers, R&B drummers, and I grew up and had the benefit of learning from all of them. And one thing that North Philadelphia also had that other neighborhoods in Philly didn't have is that we have a great Hispanic community there and a Hispanic tradition in music also. So in North Philadelphia, we also had the benefit of learning Latin music from some of the greatest who ever played it. And there's a long tradition in Philadelphia, Latin music as well as jazz. And I remember growing up and hearing some of the great salsa bands, some of the R&B bands. But man, I'll never forget what Bobby Durham gave me, what Philly Joe gave me, and what Butch Ballard gave me. It stays with me for life, and it's so much ingrained in everything I play. I use it every day.
Being born and raised in Philadelphia, Philadelphia has always been home for me. My father was a painter and my mother was a fashion designer. So for me, art was always in the home. And I think that's how I relate to art, just through a familial sense that art is, just a part of the culture. It's just everywhere you go. And especially in Philadelphia, you can see art everywhere. So for me, artists were people who didn't even have the title. You can go through the neighborhood and you can see people making sculpture in their garage, just because they felt like it, just because they thought it looked nice. You can see people making homemade paintings and putting it in their windows or when you visit their homes. So art was there too. And then you have people that, made clothes, for the young ladies and the, boys going on prom and things like that in the neighborhood. So for me, art was always accessible, where if you go to other places, you might see art, needing to have like a big stage or a marquee or big names and lights and things like that as artists, art galleries showing, those are great. But, when you come to Philadelphia, you just kind of see people in the culture, just doing things, just commonplace. Art is here and it's a part of our lives. So for me, art in Philadelphia has always been a very accessible experience.
Philadelphia has a long history of musical traditions that date back to the 19th century, with music combos and so forth. So, and you have the oldest free Black population here. Philadelphia is also between New York and Washington, D.C., so there's always a lot of exchange. A recipe for the Philadelphia musicians, some of the ingredients, and there are many, and I'll just mention a few. I would say camaraderie. They support each other. They're serious. They place a strong emphasis on the history of the music. They treat it as what it is, a classical music. And they also place a strong emphasis on continuing to swing.
I can only give you love that lasts forever, and the promise to be near each time you call. You're the only one I know. You're mine and mine alone. That's all. That's all. I can only give you a country waltz in springtime, and the hand to hold when leaves begin to fall. You're the only love I own. You're mine and mine alone. That's all. And that is all.
I think Philadelphia has a very special music scene that's really important to everyone that lives here and people that come and visit Philadelphia from really all over the world. I would describe the particular music community that I came from as really supportive. One of the first places that I started studying here in Philadelphia was at Settlement Music School, which is such an incredible place to be able to grow up and learn from, as there are so many notable alumni, and not to mention the incredible music faculty that is there. I started taking lessons there when I first started playing saxophone about 10 years ago. I was about in the 4th grade, 9 years old, and then I started just loving everything that I was learning within my lessons, and I started getting involved into ensembles where I got to play with incredible musicians who were older than me and more experienced than I was at the time, and that really helped me to grow as a musician, to be able to play with people that not only were from my own high school and middle school at the time, but with people that were all over the Philadelphia jazz community. So that was really my first time dipping a toe into being able to play with others that were not in my immediate community.
I believe that what makes Philly's music scene so special is there's the fact that Philly has such tight-knit relationships amongst each person within the community itself, and it's also the depth of the community. Our Philly's artistic community stretches far outside the boundaries of what music is itself, and it connects across every other artistic discipline. And somehow, like, everyone knows each other to some degree. It's like if you don't know them in the first degree by name, then you know them just a couple degrees removed from somebody else that you know. And I think it's the strength and cohesion of all the relationships we have with one another that really gives the city its own unique identity. I think there's a certain maybe attitude about it as well. Can't tell you how many people I've met, particularly musicians, who will just listen to a Philly artist, or even at the mention of it, it's like, oh, y'all got that dirty swing. There's something about it. There's a certain will, what it is that we're doing and how we tip towards it that no other place really has.
It was nothing to hear young people forming groups on a corner, doo-wop groups, the perfect harmony. Sunday mornings, of course, you heard gospel music. And then on Monday morning, you hear Kay Williams playing R&B. So all of that we grew up with. And I remember I grew up around 12th and Oxford. And my mother was part of the House of Prayer. And the House of Prayer had brass bands. So we would hear that music and had some great musicians. So my first music teacher, luckily she really had a strong base in the fundamentals, so I learned a lot of theory from her. But we would go to church on Sundays and hear the congregational tunes. Right, some glad morning. Okay, so you had all that kind of thing happening. But then I would come home and people would tell me, oh, yeah, love it, little love it, you taking piano. You got a R&B singer and blues singer right in your neighborhood. And I used to ask them, who is it? And it was Don Gardner, who lived right across the street, And not only was he was R&B singer, he was a great drummer. Around the corner was Solomon Burke. He came with more of that gospel sound in it. And then the Golden Strip was Columbia Avenue. So you walk down Columbia Avenue and you could hear anybody playing inside of the clubs. This is the kind of music that's happening. It was in our games, it was on our radios, it was people who lived across the street, and they were our musical heroes. And then there was the Uptown that we used to go to. And oh man, it was so rich now that I think about it.
I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that just like them. Ever since I was little, it looked like fun. And it's no coincidence I come. And I can die when I'm dying. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Baby, I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe you're crazy. We're all crazy, possibly.
A lot of Philadelphia musicians have had what a lot of people refer to as, in quotation marks, formal training. And the important thing about that, though, they use that training in the service of the music. They didn't let that dominate what their practices is as far as their performance of this music that we call jazz is concerned. Some of that has to do with the fact that Philadelphia is placing a great migration, and people from the South coming here and bringing tradition. One of the musics that was important in this regard was the gospel music. So I would describe the Philadelphia musician as one who was deeply rooted in a tradition. A lot of them were very technically adroit, so to speak, musicians who could burn. And to burn was and still is a very important part of their Philadelphia tradition. But it wasn't technical virtuosity for the sake of showing how much you could get on the horn, but once again, it was technical virtuosity in the service of the music.
Growing up, my mother was a Billy Paul fan, so I grew up listening to a lot of his music. And one of his songs, East, the Go East, and that's still one of just my favorite songs because it's just a beautiful piece of music. But looking at the artwork on the album covers, the one album cover, I can't remember the exact name of that particular album. On that album cover, he had like multiple faces. As a growing young artist, I would just stare at that artwork and just examine the painting and everything and figuring out, just like, wow, how did this artist do this piece of work? So having the chance to illustrate his profile, I approached it with a sense of reverence from every angle, recognizing him as an artist. It was an honor. Given that in the process of creating the illustration for his profile that he passed during the making of this book, initially, like it's just a profile of him became a tribute to him. And it's like all I can do is just hope that I've done him justice.
Philadelphia, first and foremost, that was a group of young musical explorers in the mid-50s through up until the early 70s. And these group of musicians was foundational and involved in the evolution of jazz music here in Philadelphia and worldwide. And that group of musicians were John Coltrane, McCoy Tyner, Shirley Scott, Reggie Workman, Jimmy Murray, Lee Morgan, Odean Pope. And we would practice from our living rooms to the streets. First of all, there were so many clubs to work during that time. And if you're familiar with the Golden Strip, which was Columbia Avenue, we had clubs from 8th Street all the way back to 23rd. The musicians would come together collectively and work together, share one another's ideas. Benny Goldston, he lived one block away from me. Hassan Emanali was the greatest influence of all people. And everybody would train, and I would go past Hassan Emanali's house to practice, Benny Goldston, Jimmy Garrison, Reggie Workman. So to answer your question, the foundation of this great legacy began in the mid-50s up through the early 70s.
Musician that I got to tell his story is Alan Nelson, drummer in Philly. One, he found his passion early in life, and that was the story I got to tell. I guess drummers have a certain Philly sound, and he epitomized that. And his story, he went to go see John Coltrane, and he saw the drummer Elvin Jones, and the story was just so amazing and how excited he was and passionate to be there. And as an artist, I kind of thought of things that happened to me like that, like my first Prince concert. So I wanted to kind of capture that energy. When I approached the story visually, I really wanted it to break out of the boxes. It's like my background is comic books, and I wanted it a little bit more freeform to kind of mirror the jazz experience. I just wanted to capture that energy. And so with all the pieces, I put them in the computer, and that's when I start playing with it. I start putting it together, and it's like there's no boxes, there's no things. It's just a fluid story that hopefully people can follow.
The ingredients that I would say create a Philadelphia musician, if I was going to make a recipe, would be a grit and tenacity, originality. I think it requires authenticity because we're it's the music industry isn't centered here. So if you want to be a musician, you're kind of doing it for the love of music, if you're based from here. So there's like an authenticity to that. And I guess this kind of redundant, but just a commitment to self, I feel, to like your true, who you actually are and what you actually want to play, and a commitment to history too, because we do have such a rich history, and I feel like in all the genres there is a commitment to learning and honoring what came before in that genre. So
To me, what makes the Philly scene so special, first of all, I wouldn't want to be in any other scene. I love our Philly musicians. They are with a lot of feeling, our musicians, our singers. Like we've been through a lot, and we come out on the other side just with emotion and feeling. And passion and empathy. I feel that the Philly musicians come across with so much heart. I know the West Coast is wonderful. There's wonderful music everywhere, but I just feel so special about our Philly sound. Coming from the Philly sound myself, Sigma and Gamble and Huff and all that too. It's just a whole different ball game.
I would come up with ingredients for a Philadelphia musician, I would say definitely determination and a bit of a thick skin, because in Philly, our elders and the people we play for will tell you if you're sounding bad. So you need a bit of a thick skin, but it's how you learn. It's that, and definitely open-mindedness, because there's so much to do in Philly. There's so many different avenues you can go, and you just never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So we definitely need to keep an open mind of all the potential, and an eye for appreciation of history, because there's so much history in Philly, and there's so much we can learn from. It's kind of endless, and I think those three ingredients, and just compassion, and just want to hang with people, just the social, someone who understands the social aspect of music, and not just being in the shed and practicing all day, but going out and hanging. That's something, I think that's something that makes a Philly musician.
Clap your hands like this. Come on. Everybody.
You know, jazz musicians, African-American musicians, people following that creative music, whatever, you know, whatever labels we want to put on it, are very special human beings. They are bold and brave and courageous, and they don't give up. And it's like walking a tightrope for your whole life. You know, a few people get settled and a few people get rewarded financially and but most of the musicians that you and I know don't. They don't. They're like out there on that tightrope, and they just keep going. And I think one of the things about Philadelphia that makes it so special is that people don't feel completely alone doing this. They inspire each other to do it and form some sort of a little safety net. That's a psychic safety net or a spiritual safety net, sometimes even a financial one, not usually. And people just have a need to explore creative problems, try to solve the problems, and then try to present those solutions to an audience that hopefully is receptive and interested.
The artist I was assigned to illustrate was Red Rodney, and his story is being told by Ted Garricky, who was a house pianist at the Society Hill Hotel. And he's like recalling this time he was with his mother as a young child, and he's going to see Red Rodney live. And Red Rodney was a very prolific jazz trumpeter. He was born in Philadelphia in 1927, and he actually went on to be a professional musician by the age of 15. He was really young. And to hear how he just kind of went for it at such a young age is really, really admirable. So I spent a lot of time trying to get in Ted Garricky's head. I wanted to make sure I captured him as a child and like the kind of awe he would feel seeing Red Rodney live. So I really wanted the panel that's showcasing Red Rodney to be framed by all the other panels. I knew I wanted that to be like the bang. It like captures your eye as soon as you look at the page. So I made it the brightest. It has the most color contrast than any of the other panels. It's a panel that really grabs your attention. I made mine a comic instead of just a single illustration. And I really wanted to make sure the viewer could understand what was happening without any words. So I spent a lot of time going over the sequence and making sure every image that's shown flows correctly from one to another, and gives off that feeling even if there's no text being seen.
I was assigned to work on Bootsy Barnes. I know nothing about jazz, but I loved the paragraph or the small essay that he wrote about himself, because that was a jumping off point for not just the piece that I did, but just the way I understood him to be as a person. As you know, he passed away from COVID, and I remember reading the obituary, and there was a small piece in the Inquirer that was lovely, and it was all of a piece with what he wrote about himself. Bootsy Barnes is homegrown goodness, just a real person, nothing grandiose. I really connected with just his humility and his decency and his humor. You could just really feel, well, in his story, he talks about being a little boy and waiting for the parade to come down the street. And, we all know, if you have a happy childhood or any kind of a childhood, but it sounded like he came from a family, they're musicians, and, his brothers are drumming on things and they're waiting for the parades. It's such, I could feel that little boy in him. And then, when I read the piece in the Inquirer upon his passing, that little boy was still in there.
The way that I see Philadelphia musicians making history today is the way that I've seen Philadelphia musicians make history in the past, through just being themselves, being fearless, grooving hard, swinging hard, whichever they're doing, being individuals. We have some strong individuals here in Philadelphia. That is still probably the number one consistent ideal that drives the scene today, that drove the scene in the past. And it was just not being afraid to be an individual and to make a strong, fearless statement. Repeat. Continue.